Thank you for calling the Joy FM.
When you toss a pebble into a pond, you see the ripples. You can watch as each ripple spreads out from the point of impact. This is Jacqueline. In 1998, Jacqueline could best have been described as someone searching. She was in a very dark place and in need of something real. Then, at a stoplight, she read a sticker on the car in front of her that said, "The Joy FM." She reached over, tuned her radio to the station, and found what she had been searching for. Her life radically changed. Not only had she found new life through Jesus Christ, but that joy rippled out to her mother, father, and sisters. Within 2 years, she helped them all find joy in Jesus. All these years later, every preset on her radio is still set on the Joy FM. And she continues to cause ripples she may never see with her very own Joy FM sticker on the back of her car. Then there are the ripples that happen when we share our stories. In 2013, Carmen introduced us to her best friends, Chris and Kelly. They'd met in church and worked together with Young Life. Their families were close. Chris and Kelly were high school sweethearts with 2 grown daughters and looking forward to the rapidly approaching empty nester season. That year, Chris had been told that the cancer he thought he'd beaten was back. For months, the Joy FM community prayed with Chris and Kelly, and we hoped and trusted that Chris would beat cancer for a second time. But that spring, Chris lost his battle. Shortly after, Kelly joined the morning cruise to talk about holding on to faith in the midst of pain and loss. Listening that morning was Sherry. Sherry and her husband Gary both grew up in church, but had not been walking with the Lord for some time. After 29 years of marriage, they moved to Florida after losing jobs in Ohio. They were fighting over the lack of money, and Sherry was considering divorce. Then Gary, who had always been a physically strong man, came home saying he'd hurt his back. With no medical insurance, he tried for months to find relief through several means before finally going to the hospital where the doctor said he suspected cancer. Sherry was stunned, shocked, and angry. She was convinced the doctors had made a huge mistake, but the test results soon confirmed the worst. Sherry prayed and begged but couldn't find peace. She was relentlessly pursued by fear. Then she heard Kelly's story on the morning cruise. She cried buckets, but felt God telling her, "I am the great I am. I will be here for you, just like I was there for her." The prognosis for Gary's cancer was grim. Less than a week without treatment, 2 to 4 years with treatment. But Gary's still here. Now, Sherry says that cancer was the best thing that ever happened to them. Not the disease, but the effect it had on their lives. They have renewed relationships with God and a new love for Him and each other. Chad and Melanie also had to ride the wave of cancer. Chad grew up listening to Stephen Curtis Chapman, and his songs made an incredibly deep impression in Chad's life. In March 2005, Chad and his wife Melanie bought tickets to see Stephen Curtis Chapman in concert. But when Melanie was diagnosed with colon cancer, plans changed. At the age of 25, Melanie was suddenly in a literal fight for life. After recovering from the chemo treatments, Melanie contacted the Joy FM and told us their story. At the time, the Joy FM was celebrating 20 years by granting 20 wishes, and Chad became wish number 3. He received tickets to see Stephen in concert and transportation from Tampa to Plant City by private airplane. After the battle they had just been through, it infused joy into their weary souls. After the aggressive chemo treatments, Melanie only had a 50% chance of carrying a child, but they soon celebrated the birth of their daughter, Emily. Unfortunately, they were soon hit by another wave of cancer. For the next 2 years, she battled intensely, courageously, and faithfully. Then 1 month after Chad graduated with his PhD, and just 2 days before their 10th anniversary, Melanie passed away. A few weeks later, Chad moved to Atlanta to start a new job. He surfed the radio dial and heard the familiar voices of the morning cruise. The Joy FM was a tremendous source of healing during the months that followed. In the midst of intense pain and suffering, God reminded Chad that joy is not temporary, it's eternal. Eventually, God blessed Chad and Emily with a new wife and mommy, and 3 more kids. Sometimes, instead of a pebble, it can feel like someone has thrown a massive boulder into the pond that is your life. Sonia and her husband and their 2 young sons moved from Atlanta to Carrollton so her husband could follow his dream of starting a farm. Sonia continued to commute to Atlanta, where she worked as a nurse. During the family's annual 4th of July trip to Savannah, Sonia asked her husband if he was happy. She was shocked when his answer was a definitive no. A few weeks later, she learned he was actually having an affair. Sonia was blindsided and not feeling very loved by God. That's when she was hit by a ripple. She was invited to a Bible study being taught by Samantha Kirby. Samantha and her husband, Dr. Brian Kirby, had endured a long struggle with infertility, and after much prayer, they were finally blessed with twin boys, Asa and Elijah, only to lose them as toddlers in a tragic accident. Sonia had found someone who knew great pain and yet still held on to faith. As a single mom, Sonia couldn't keep making the commute to Atlanta, so she left the job she loved, and she spent a couple of years bouncing from nursing job to nursing job, then decided to pursue a Master's of Nursing at Mercer University, hoping to become a family nurse practitioner. As she neared graduation, she tuned into the morning cruise and heard Dave, Bill, and Carmen talking about holding on to faith when dealing with rejection. Scared and struggling with her own feelings of rejection, Sonia reached out to her radio family. That call started another ripple. Soon after she made that call, Sonia randomly ran into her old Bible study leader, Samantha. Samantha had been listening when Sonia called in. She casually mentioned that her husband, already a very successful, well-respected chief of anesthesia, had felt God's call to start a new practice in Carrollton, and he would need a nurse practitioner. Sonia was floored. A couple of weeks later, she shadowed him in the clinic and then was offered the position. Sometimes the ripples are felt when we hear just the right song at just the right moment. When Gabe's parents got married, his mom, a woman of faith, introduced his dad to Jesus. So when Gabe was born later that year, he came into a loving family of Jesus followers. The Joy FM was always on in the home, so Gabe and his sister grew up listening to it. Gabe also loved listening to Light Force, a Saturday night rock show on the Joy FM that has since become LF Radio, one of our 24/7 streaming stations. That's where he first heard his favorite band, Skillet. Then the trouble began. Gabe's parents began having severe issues, and within a couple of years, they had separated. Watching his family crumble to dust brought Gabe to the point of suicide. He was headed to his mother's closet to get the gun that he would use to end his life when he felt the ripple. He heard a Skillet song playing in the background, and the lyrics stopped him in his tracks. He dropped to his knees and broke down. Gabe gave his life to Jesus. In an instant, he crossed from the brink of death to the start of a new life. This is Johanna. Johanna had a very religious upbringing as her alcoholic stepfather tried to find the true church. His search even involved some brushes with what Johanna later found out to be cults. By the time she reached adulthood, she knew plenty about God and Jesus and religion, but certainly nothing about a personal relationship with a living Savior. She had a husband who she loved, a great marriage, 3 wonderful kids, a brand new home, had reached the highest professional level of success in her field, but even though she seemingly had all the world could offer, she felt burned out and empty. Her daughter kept inviting her to church, but she was far too busy for that. Then she invited her to a play. Johanna had time for that. The play was presented by her daughter's church. By the end of the evening, Johanna had received Christ as Savior. A few days later, her daughter gave her a Bible, invited her to church again, and handed her a slip of paper with the name of a radio station she might enjoy, the Joy FM. God had her on a fast track to learning and growing as a Christian, and the Joy FM became a big part of that growth. Oh, and her daughter? Oh, you remember Jacqueline. That sticker that Jacqueline saw at a red light was the ripple that led her to tune to the Joy FM, which then caused the ripple that brought her to Jesus, which then rippled out to her whole family, including Johanna, which leads us to one more ripple. 2 years later, almost to the day after giving her life to Jesus, Johanna became the director of support for the Joy FM, where she's been helping send out ripples for almost 20 years. As a listener-supported station, every gift given to the Joy FM is like a pebble. When you toss your pebble into the pond, watch the ripples.
Are you calling to make a gift?